New Historicism by Madison Antle. New Historicism is a modern literary theory used to analyze a text while acknowledging its historical context and role in shaping literature. This theory concentrates on events, places, culture, economy, politics, and social status of the era in which the author lived in, while also acknowledging the reader is tainted by their own historical context. New historicists reject the new critical theory that a work or text must be separated from its history. In the late 1970s, New Historicism was highly debated in contrast to the New Critical Theory, and by the 1980s, the theory was widely accepted as a school of thought and closely linked with two major supporters of the theory, Stephen Greenblatt and Michael Foucault. In England, during the reigns of King James I and Queen Elizabeth I, childbirth and homemaking were some of the highest responsibilities for a woman. Women were property and to be directed by the men in their lives, whether that be a father, family member, or husband.
Perhaps he loves you now, and now no soil nor cautle doth besmirch the virtue of his will. But you must fear his greatness weighed, his will is not his own, for he himself is subject to his birth. He may not, as unvalued persons do, carve for himself, for on his choice depends the safety and the health of his whole state.
Don't believe his vows, for they are brokers, not of that dye which their investments show, but mere implorators of unholy suits, breathing like sanctified and pious bawds, the better to beguile.
These quotes uphold the gender dynamic of Shakespeare's era, with Ophelia being told what to do by her brother and father. Both men prioritize reputation over her happiness, and distinctly talk down to her and treat her as a lesser being. I am but mad north-northwest. When the wind is southerly, I know a hawk from a handsaw. In Elizabethan time, madness could be understood as a form of internalization of disobedience. Hamlet feels guilty that he has not been able to avenge his father after he has asked him to, and once the ghost appears to Hamlet for a second time after berating his mother, his father says that he has taken too long to avenge his murder. Shakespeare also liked to present madness in an eccentric manner because in his time it was used in a comedic manner and the people liked it for their entertainment. This is different from how we perceive madness in today's age. We now understand that mental illness can be caused by many things and many factors come into play for different people. There's a possibility of genetics, trauma, etc. We know that it is a chemical imbalance in the brain and not something people can control. My hour is almost come, when I, to sulphurous and tormenting flames, must render up myself. In Hamlet, it is mentioned that Hamlet's father is in a state of purgatory and is now dead roaming the earth. During Shakespeare's time and the conversion to Protestant beliefs, the idea of purgatory existing was denied, but it is known that Shakespeare's parents were loyal Catholics and probably still held much of their original beliefs. Shakespeare would have likely included purgatory to incite controversy whether he believed in it or not. It is not very strange, for my uncle is king of Denmark, and those that would make mouths at him while my father lived give 20, 40, 50, 100 ducats apiece for his picture and little. Sploods, there is something in this more than natural if philosophy could find out. In this quote, Hamlet is referring to his uncle who is now king of Denmark. He mentions that before his father died, Claudius was ridiculed and spoken poorly of, but now that he is king, everyone loves him. This is because, in the time it was written, 1609, the monarch was seen as a famous icon just for having their title, rather than possessing any noble qualities. The dystopian world in 1984 parallels the Stalinist Soviet Union, Hitler's Nazi Germany, and Orwell's own experiences. He took inspiration from these different experiences to create a book that not only provides the reader with a source of entertainment and knowledge of many of the big ideas in history, but he also used it as a warning for the future. Orwell saw what was happening in the Soviet Union and used many of Stalin's tactics in his book to create the picture of a communist country so that people in the Western countries could see what was happening and understand to what degree it was affecting the citizens. George Orwell created a secret police in Oceania, called the Thought Police, who uncover and remove people who hold beliefs, opinions, or any thoughts that go against those of the party. The Thought Police would get him just the same. He would have committed, even if he had never set pen to paper, the essential crime that contained all other in itself. The KGB. With the Soviet Union, there was the NKVD and then the KGB, which were secret police directed by Stalin. These secret police, very similarly to the secret police in 1984, were meant to uncover any rebels or anyone that opposed ideologies of the Soviet Communist Party. The NKVD ran from July 10, 1934 to 1946, and then was replaced by the KGB, which ran from March 13, 1954 to 1991. Big Brother and Stalin. Big Brother is the leader of the Oceania and the face of the party. He represents all of the party's ideologies and the enforcer figure. Looking at Big Brother and Stalin side by side, it is clear to see that Orwell drew inspiration from the leader and face of the Soviet Communist Party, who was in power from 1924 until his death in 1953. Not only was the appearance copied, but many of the ideologies. Stalin is the most famous leader of Russia and is one of the most known leaders of the world. He was known for running his country with the terror of its citizens and the responsibility of millions of deaths. Adolf Hitler was the leader of the Nazi Party and rose to power, becoming the Chancellor of Germany in 1933. Having lived through World War II and the Holocaust, George Orwell was able to understand the destruction that a communist and fascist government/leader could lead to. Very similarly to the Stalinist Soviet Union, he was able to take their propaganda tactics and recreate them in his novel.
War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength.
The most brilliant propagandist technique will yield no success unless one fundamental principle is borne in mind constantly. It must confine itself to a few points and repeat them over and over. So as we can see, Orwell did just that. He created a slogan that would be continuously repeated throughout everyday life. Posters of the slogan would be plastered all around London, constantly repeated by party members and ingrained into the citizens' minds. Nearly all children nowadays were horrible. What was worst of all was that by means of such organizations as the spies, they were systematically turned into ungovernable little savages, and yet this produced in them no tendency whatever to rebel against the discipline of the party. On the contrary, they adored the party and everything connected with it. During Hitler's reign, he created the Nazi Youth Group, which was founded in 1922. George Orwell created the Junior Spies as a representation for the psychological effect and brainwashing that was happening to the children in his era. In both youth groups, it allowed them to remove them from the influence of their parents, train them as an army with military-grade training from a younger age, and install devotion to their leader. The key word here is black-white. Like so many Newsweek words, this word has two mutually contradictory meanings. Applied to an opponent, it means the habit of impudently claiming that black is white, in contradiction to plain facts. In the end, the party would announce that 2 and 2 made 5, and you would have to believe it. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. It is evident that Orwell used this method all throughout 1984. The government was always lying and manipulating the citizens of Oceania to believe anything they deemed the truth, even though it was virtually impossible, like the famous quote, 2 + 2 = 5.